Hello grade 12 students, welcome back to another tutorial and to a new unit on graphic user interfaces in NetBeans. The goal of these tutorials is to get us set up with the understanding that we need to create our own user interfaces to make the projects that we create much more user-friendly, easy to interact with, and overall just more of a pleasant experience to work with in many different ways. We're going to be starting here by creating a new project. And this project is just going to be a basic Java application. But what we're going to be doing here is making sure that create main class is disabled. I'm going to call this GUI practice lesson. And just create this project now. Over here, you'll see in our practice lesson, I have no source packages right now. I have nothing that I've created to create the content for this in. So I'm going to right click on my actual project folder and say new JFrame form. JFrame is the library that we'll be primarily working with to implement our user interface elements. So by creating this JFrame form, I'm just going to call this my practice UI. And I'm actually going to give it a custom package name. We don't usually want to put it in our default package. Sometimes there can be weird things that happen with it. I'm going to call it my practice UI, all in lowercase, just to give it a name for a special package that we have there. My practice UI, my practice UI, awesome. And we'll notice that what pops up right away is this set of tabs, source, design, and history. History, we're not going to worry about at this point in time. We're not getting into a complex enough spot to really worry about it too much. But we do want to have our design panel here with the window that we're able to drag and drop visual components from our palette, as well as our source code that we'll be referring to a little bit later on. One thing I want us to do right off the bat. NetBeans has been causing some trouble interacting with our JFrame class information at times. If we go under File and go under Project Properties, under Build and Compiling, we'll see this checkbox, Compile on Save. We are going to deselect this. Something that NetBeans has been doing in one of its more recent updates is, as you're working through your project and running some test runs of it, it's been kind of forgetting to clear its cache properly and remembering temporary elements it shouldn't, which is causing tons of glitches that actually aren't problems in the code. It's problems in the way that NetBeans is accessing it. So by going here, I'll show you one more time. Project properties, compiling, turn off compile on save for this project. That tends to help us avoid any of those stack clearing, cache clearing errors that are kind of causing us some trouble. All right, back to this here. I believe all of you have seen this before. We're going to go through a brief rundown on what some of our options are in terms of the containers and controls, as well as menus that we're working with. I'm going to do a brief overview of some of these and show you how to set up some basic interactions in this tutorial today. The main idea here is that under our palette, now side note, if you don't see your palette here at all, we can go under Windows and under IDE Tools, we want to have the palette enabled. We also want to have properties enabled. So both of these, when I click on the screen, I should have properties popping up for this window, this JPanel, or JFrame. And we're able to drop all sorts of different types of things into this space. More things than we're going to be worrying about in this project, although once we get used to kind of the basic way we engage each of these different types of object, then you'll be able to explore and add in different types, mostly without too much effort on your part learning some new things. Let's start by dragging in panel. This is the most basic type of object that we can have. When we have our panel inside of our bigger frame here, I can change the variable name if I'd like. Maybe I'll call this my panel just to add some customization to it. And we'll just quickly look through the list of things here. Events we'll talk about a little bit later, how we customize interactability with these objects. And then we have a bunch of different types of editing tools that we won't go into too much detail about now. The main one that we will worry about is our properties, which pops up the menu that we have on the side over here. So just note that we have all this functionality already on our toolbar on the side, just so we don't get confused. Awesome. If I include our second swing container, a tabbed pane here, then I'm actually able to insert one of our panels inside of this, and notice that it creates a tab. If I drag another panel and put it inside, if it's going to be, oh, why won't you go in for me, panel? Let's make it a bit smaller so it actually registers it better. Oh, up near the top. We can have a couple different tabs here. And just so you can see what this looks like a little bit more, I'm just going to take a label and toss it in tab number 1. I'm going to run my program here really quick. What we should be seeing pop up is our frame here with our label in tab 1 and not in tab 2. Okay, cool. So we have some ability to jump between information here. Awesome, let's drop out of this. Split pane, you can explore this on your own if you're curious, as well as scroll pane. It just has different ways of organizing these ways of the visual setup of some of our information. Toolbar, we won't be using in this project, but you can give customized controls. Maybe as one of your extension activities, you might want to include changing the actual interactions that your clicks are doing by switching between different tools. That's how you'd run it through here. And our desktop pane is a pretty interesting one here. The way that we set this up is we usually we overlay the entire window with this desktop pane. And what this is doing is it's mimicking how our desktop kind of works in the first place. This idea that we can have different, if I open up this wonderful picture of myself that I use for professional posting on things, we have a separate window here that we have on floating around on our desktop that we can move around and minimize and close and maximize and all those beautiful things. We can kind of mimic that same functionality. I'm just going to pop some stuff back up in the background here in our project by including internal frames. I'm going to drag a couple in here, make them a little bit bigger. And a side note, all these weird gray boxes that are extending off from these frames are just some of the functionality that the program uses to try and automatically adjust lining things up. Notice the top and the bottom of that gray box. When I drag it, it lines up with the gray box of this other item. So those are just kind of guides that are built in for the automatic sizing and spacing to try and help your program be a bit more organized. So I can make sure that it's kind of lined up along the horizontal plane there nicely. Now, one thing that I have to do in particular with internal frames under properties, or I'll just go over here, is turn on some of their options: closable, iconifiable, maximizable, resizable. And we'll see the difference between these two windows. I'm just going to save my project, pop this thing open. I recommend that you play around with these things as I do or on your own after you're done watching this video. You'll notice that we have a lot more functionality on this left window than the right one. Now right now I'm having some trouble doing this. I actually can't maximize, oh, the close did work. Until I minimize and maximize again, I can't drag things around, but now that I have, I can drag it around, I can resize it, I can do all the functionality, kind of like things are on the desktop. This one I didn't enable any of that functionality, so it's just kind of floating information, which may be what you want somewhere. Notice that the layering occurs naturally when we have selected, so it's a nice way to add some more flexibility into the user experience of your program if you wanted to engage a tool like this. Keep in mind that inside of this internal frame, I can drop whatever other information that I want here inside of it, just another layer to work with. I'm going to delete all of that desktop pane. Layered pane just allows us to set custom layers, what goes on top of other things. We can force things to be on a higher layer than other ones for various reasons. All right, onto our swing controls. In here, we have the types of objects that we are going to be interacting with in different ways. Labels tend to just be there to send or output information to us. This label, for example, if I edit the text, I might just say, I don't know what I want to write here, some text that we want to have output to the user. I'm going to change this variable name just to my label, just so that I can remember something for a little bit later in the tutorial. And I'm going to go over into my properties, and you notice with these labels, there's a lot of different things you can play around with. One of the most important ones here will be the background and foreground colors. Let's just change the text color right now, maybe to red. And let's change the font. Let's make this bold. Let's make this bigger. And let's make this some other different font, some text. All right. So we've changed it. Easy to customize the information for this. We're going to be messing around with the content of this a little bit later using a button. Same idea with our button. I can edit the text. Press me, just to lure the user. Oops. Change the variable name. Let's call it my button. just so that I know what I'm looking for when I go back into my source code soon. And I'm not going to mess around with any of the settings of my button. There's lots of things we can do. We'll come back to that a little bit later. I'll let you explore some of these other options. A toggle button allows it to kind of have more easy functionality from switching back and forth in its visual display. Checkboxes to enable, you know how a checkbox works. I don't need to explain all this stuff to you guys. You can explore a lot of these on your own. Lists, text field, text area. For now, I'm going to create a text area over here. And when I run my code, notice that some text is just information. I can't click on it. Press me actually is engaged like a button, but it doesn't do anything because I haven't actually given it any instructions. Creating the button is like NetBeans only does the most basic layer automatically, actually putting it in place with the right functionality, but we have to tell it what to do. And then inside of this text area, I can type information to be processed later if I want. You might have messed around with this last year a little bit. We're going to be changing some of the stuff in here as well. I'm actually going to set the text in here, sample text. That will be changing soon enough. And my text area. One more thing that I'm going to add into my project here. I'm going to add another label, but this label I'm going to do something different with. I'm going to go down to icon. And under icon, I'll see that I can actually bring in an external image. So why don't we pull something off the internet to add in here? I don't know, what kind of image do we want to pull in? Why don't we just say like a cute puppy popping up? And in here, I want to make sure under tools, under color, I grab a transparent image so that it kind of fits nicely into my world. It's going to make the game feel a little bit better. Why don't we choose this little guy? He seems pretty cute. So I'm going to copy image address, or I can just open it in a new tab and copy this address here. It's looking like actually it's not giving me a great reference. This might not work in NetBeans. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to paste it in and hit enter. And if this image is going to import properly, it'll show up down here. The reference to this one isn't a very good one, so let's take a different one here. Back to our transparent images. Let's try this little guy. Oh, he's animated. Open it in a new tab. And I don't think this is going to be great either. This is an HTML. These ones are being troublesome for us here. Don't let us down, little guy. Here we go, PNG file. This one should work a little bit better. Hit enter. It should be wanting to import here. Unfortunately, I have not found a file that NetBeans is happy with. Luckily, I have a backup on my desktop. I downloaded something a little bit earlier. Where did I get it? A cute puppy over here. This one I found earlier did work. And one thing we're going to notice about this, however, is that it's a very big file. Unfortunately, NetBeans doesn't have an easy way for us to actually work with editing it right here live. You know, if I do this, it kind of cuts it off. If you go into your project, if you import a file, you'll see it under your source packages, the actual file here, and you can actually go open an external editor. Here in Paint, it'll open up, and you can resize it here. I'm going to reduce this to be 25% as it was in the first place. Hit save, and when I come back into my project, I believe I have to close it up and open it up again, and when I come back in, it's going to be resized. Under this label, I'm going to delete the text, and I'm going to shift this over. So now I have this wonderful picture of the puppy. I'm going to bring these things in a bit closer again. All right, so now we have what I would consider for this first part of our project, the four most basic elements that we're going to be wanting to work with. We have a label, a text field to input and output information to, a button for interaction, and some image. Maybe you'll have a bunch of different images in your project here. The transparency didn't work so well. I think that's because we actually messed it up in Paint, but we'll leave that for another time. To wrap up this tutorial, we're going to set up some basic interactions. We'll go over this more in our next tutorial, but I want to, when I right-click on it, add an event. And here's where things start to get fun. I'll just recap this really quick. If I run my program, what it is that we're going to see is that everything here is working, but we don't have any actual interesting stuff going on in our program. We got to code it in. Over in our source documentation, I'm just going to collapse some of these comments here. We have all of the code that has been so far automatically generated for us. I didn't type any code in yet. The benefit of using this particular structure is that dragging and dropping the various elements becomes easy, because we'll notice here, if I go under this breakdown window, this is the generated code. There's quite a bit of stuff here that we can avoid having to type in by using our design view. Notice that my label, my button, my text area, I didn't actually change some of the names of other things, but that's okay. It gets automatically populated. The variable declarations are here automatically as well, and the components are added where they need to be. I cannot edit any of this information. It's locked from editing, which is great. I can't mess it up. I edit that information in here, but I'm still allowed to add whatever else I want to into the other parts of the code. For example, my practice UI, this is the constructor. I can add other elements to its constructor. Down here, we have our main. Notice that the main does set up and actually create the visible practice UI. But down below here, I can add more information to the main if I want. And then anywhere else in my program, either down below here or above up here, I can add all my custom methods that I want, whatever I need to do. So one thing that we're going to see here is if I right-click on Press Me and go to Events, there's a bunch of different types of events that we can work with. We'll explore some of these together. A lot of these you can explore on your own. Action performed is the one I want right now. This means it's interacted with primarily through the mouse, but there can be other interactions. But for now, action performed. And as soon as I click on it, it's going to create the basic structure of this method for me. My button. That is the thing that I added that event to. Notice if I go back to events, action is bold. Action performed shows that there actually has been a method created for that as a reminder. And then in here, I can add my handling code. Here's what I want Press Me to do. For now, let's just have it change the text of these two other objects, and then maybe change the size of this label. Let's see if we can get this to work as such. So, my button action performed. First of all, I'm going to take my label and access its information. There's a ton of methods to explore here. For now, I'm just going to use the set text. We did it. Let's just double check that this works for us. When I press the button, we did it. It works. And accessing the other elements is simply as easy as remembering their names as set by ourselves here or whatever was automatically created. I want my text area. And again, I have this lovely method, set text. Hopefully this works too. We'll check that one in a little bit. And then we finally have this image. Let's change our variable name to myLabel2, just for consistency's sake. And then up here, myLabel2. And here, I'm going to set my size to some new dimensions. I'm going to set my size, I don't know what numbers to choose here. Let's just make it 200 by 200 and see how that looks. So back over here, everything's in its initial state. When I run my program, I hit Press Me. I wonder if that was actually coincidentally the initial size of it. Let's just change those numbers a little bit. Make it a little bit stretchy. It's having some trouble setting the size of this label here, so I'll have to explore that a little bit more later. I usually do change the size of different elements. The label I was just exploring right now, and there's something funny with it, but the idea remains the same, is that we've set some event processing going on here pretty simply by right-clicking on our object, and we can add other similar functionality to different things, although you will notice that some of our objects don't have access to the same events. It depends on their type of object because they're meant to have different purposes. So the button has the action event, because it's a button. It's supposed to be able to be clicked on. Other elements, not so much. And we'll get a better handle on some of these things as we continue working through. That's all for this tutorial. See you in the next one, where we're going to start off looking at some of the code for a clicker idle style game.